Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Ironside will not be seen tonight, so we may bring you the following special program.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Great week this week, man. Last night we started with Brian Bendis. Tomorrow night we got Scott Snyder, but tonight it's all about J.M. DeMatteis, who joins us again to talk about some current books and certainly take your questions about some of the older stuff. But Mark, great to see you. Welcome back.
Great to see you too. I have to say I was watching that Alex Ross ad, and what COVID has done to my brain, I'm looking at the shadow and I'm thinking, pull up your mask. It's not covering your nose. You know, that was my first reaction when I saw that. Why is it not covering his nose? Doesn't he know there's a pandemic?
That's a really good. You're right, man. And you can't. There's no mask big enough for that honker.
That's God. Right. That's right.
He and Sherlock Holmes. They have the giant noses. Absolutely. So Mark, I'll be honest. I wasn't reading Justice League Infinity right away, and then saw you tease this incredible cover from today, and it's like, what? And you even had Susan Eisenberg going, what?
Right.
So
James Tucker did that cover, by the way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
I said I really wanted James to do a cover, and then when I came up with this one, I said, James, could you do this cover, please? And he was very excited to do it and did a beautiful job.
No question. You know, I texted him today telling him that we were talking, and I said, you know, in a few weeks when you got time, I would love to talk more about this series. To explain to me, in terms of plotting and everything else, like, all right, how you know, did he come to you? How did this happen? How did you guys get together to do this? I know you were a writer on the series.
Yes, I wrote, I think, 7 episodes of Justice League Unlimited. That was sort of the show that began my career writing animation. I'd done a couple of animated things before then, but that's the one where I fell in love with animation, and happily they fell in love back. So it's been a steady gig since then. And so what happened was, I think that DC had great success with this Batman Adventures book, and they were looking for the next thing to do. And so they got in touch with me and said, hey, do you want to do basically the next season of Justice League Unlimited and do it with James Tucker? So James and I have worked together, you know, on a lot of different projects over probably 15 years, you know, or more. You know, we worked on those series. We worked on a bunch of the animated movies together. So, you know, who's going to say no to that? I loved working on that show. And, you know, one of the great things about doing this is, although James and I have worked together a lot, we got, we were working one-on-one on this, so we really got to know each other in a way we had not known each other before. And he's just a great guy and a great collaborator. And as to how we're working, it's basically, we get on the phone and we just start bouncing around ideas. And then, once we nail down something that we think works, I basically go off and do the writing. And James, like the producer, will give me notes along the way and say, well, maybe if we adjust this, or our characters wouldn't have said it that way or wouldn't have done that, which is great, because whenever there's a question about any of that, I will always defer to James because he's the expert, but it's just been great fun. We've had tremendous freedom to tell the story exactly the way we want to tell it. It's a bigger story than they ever did on the show. I'll say that. It's this big multiversal, cosmic, crazy story, and it only gets bigger from here. That's all I can say. We have 3 more issues to go, and it only gets bigger. So and Ethan Beavers doing the penciling and inking, Nick Filardi on the colors. Our editor is Andrew Marino. Got to plug everybody, and everybody on the team, loves this world, loves these characters, and is really pouring heart and soul into it. We're really treating it like it's the next season.
100%, man, and that's how it reads.
Yeah,
and all the great appearances. I mean, my God, you start with poor Amazo freaking out in this weird alternate, kind of dimension and everything, causing in some way some of these temporal and alternate universe changes and stuff. But really, man, it's been so much fun, and I got various images. Is this all right? So yeah, I mean, things start off real happy. We got Flash's
surprise birthday party.
And I don't know when. I mean, we all knew in terms of subtext that it was Wally, and even at one point there was that one great episode where Wally goes to like the Flash Museum and you see all the statues and berries and everything is represented. But I don't remember when they finally started calling Wally out as, the JLU Flash.
Oh, on the show, he was always the Flash.
Okay.
Yeah, he was always the Flash on the show.
Obviously he was like the younger member of the team, and I know it was assumed. I didn't know if there was
No, there was. I don't remember. Barry Allen might have been mentioned. I don't even think he was ever mentioned. I think just the way that John Stewart was really the Green Lantern, and Wally was the Flash.
Okay,
and he brought that youthful kind of cocky energy that he has. Made him a great character to write.
Mark, I'm going to put this comment up, and I didn't realize if you were the creator of Guy Gardner. Were you the creator?
No.
Yeah.
I'd love to take the credit and the money, but I can't. I think Steve was I'm sorry. Guy Gardner goes back to like the 60s. So probably Gardner Fox. It was John Broome. John Broome. That's who wrote Green Lantern.
Okay, and he probably was named Gardner for the homage.
Yeah, that's probably true. And then I think it was Steve Englehart developed him into the kind of cranky character, and then Keith and I got our hands on him and twisted him in all kinds of strange directions. So I think a lot of people identify that character with us the same way that they identify Beetle and Booster and Fire and Ice and all those characters with us, but we did not create them.
I understand. No, and Steve confirms it absolutely. And yeah, man. Well, and as I put up the finger up, one punch.
That's right. That a panel lives on, 30 plus years after it was written. No. I was talking to somebody about this recently. It's like, well, how did you guys feel creating such a classic series? No one sits down and says, I am now going to create a classic series. It's whatever that gig is for that month, and on you go to the next and the next and the next. And it's just, luck or grace or whatever it is that 30 plus years later, there are these stories that we get to keep talking about.
There you go. Oh, here, Dan says Wally's name was revealed in the second season finale of Justice League. You can see him with his red hair when Bruce reveals everyone's identities. I totally forgot about that. That's so funny.
Right. Oh, that's when they all knew each other's names. Yeah, but in terms of Barry Allen, there was never a Barry Allen on the show, as far as I know.
I hear you. Well, like I said, I just know at one point, and maybe he was in the future, and it might have also been statues of himself, but I remember him visiting the Flash Museum, things like that.
I've been since I've been working on the series, I've been rewatching the show, because even though I wrote for it, I'm not an expert. I didn't see every episode, So I get on the treadmill every day, and it's like, let's watch another Justice League. Forget my contributions. That show is so good. So good. They could take the scripts for some of those 3-parters that they did, those really epic ones. You'd have the best Justice League movie ever made. Just that. I'll keep saying that no one at Warner Brothers ever went to like Bruce Timm and these guys and said, would you please write a movie for us? It's like, I don't understand. I really don't understand.
Well, and even one step further, Mark, when McDuffie was writing his Justice League comic book, and it was like, well, you can't use Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman because these things are happening to them right now. And literally, he's like, well, how about the Atom? No. How about Hawkman? No. And it was like Zatara, Plastic Man, and Elongated Man, because you need two stretchy heroes at the same time.
Right.
Clearly.
And Dwayne contributed so much to that show. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
So on both sides, on the comic side and the animated, and well, three sides and the film side, to not tap into this magic.
I know.
You're part of that mix, man. I mean, again, and we've seen that, thankfully, as the movies got more, for a lack of better words, sophisticated or got a little grittier and stuff. And certainly your Deathstroke movie showed that. And a lot of what James produced when he took over from Bruce Timm as the supervising producer and everything.
Yeah, James was producer on when I did Batman versus Robin and Batman Bad Blood. Yeah,
man. No, and it's, thank God we are at this point now where they get it. They finally get it. I mean, I remember in those early days of Superman versus Doomsday and some of those first animated movies being at conventions, and the animation people and even Levitz were taking these questions like, hey, Judas Contract and all these other stories. And like, we'll get there. It's a process. You got to kind of convince these guys that there really is a market for this stuff. Thankfully, there is. And truly, as you say, the Justice League series was this evolution that started with the Batman animated series and then the Superman series. Yeah. When you got to Justice League, I mean, there's a reason why this is beloved. And, our buddy Susan Eisenberg, I always call her Spartacus because she's the one that's kind of leading the charge of, hey, get the cast together and let's make an animated movie. Yeah. Everybody, it's been 20 years and this team is so beloved.
I know. The series really, from what I've seen in terms of the reaction, that series has grown in stature over the years. It's like it's become, I was a great gig. Don't get me wrong, but now it's like people hold it in such high regard. Now it's like a classic. Yes. And but it goes again. It's the same thing. People don't know they're making a classic when they're making a classic. They're just doing the work.
Well, and thankfully, it was all people that love the subject matter.
Yeah,
which is I don't know if you saw or if you even wrote any of those Justice League action cartoons.
No, though I didn't work on that show. No.
Okay, because
I saw them. Yeah, they were fun. They were a lot of fun.
I was gonna say, oh my God, the amount of story they packed in 9 minutes.
Right, and well, look at Justice League Unlimited. Those without commercials, that's about 22 minutes an episode. There's so much action. There's so much real characterization and character evolution. I mean, I am in awe of those guys. I really am.
I hear you, man. I'm going to bring up more images from this arc that you guys are doing right now in Infinity. Hold on. My mouse is picking on me here. All right. So, yeah, there's the birthday and everything. But wait a minute. Let's see. For instance, I mean, God, we had that great, was that the end of the first issue?
Yeah, it's the end of the first issue when Superman and Overman swap places. Yeah. And
that was great to see Overman again and again. A callback to the Superman animated series and the way that things ended and stuff.
Right, and well, the great thing here is, since it's the multiverse, this isn't exactly the guy that you saw. This is from a slightly different world. And also, when we're introducing new characters, like we just introduced this Justice Alliance from Earth D, which are a bunch of characters that Marv Wolfman created back in the 90s. I mean, it's really diverse, way ahead of the curve, Marv. Very, very diverse Justice League. But we're treating it as if this is the show. And on the show, you take what's in the comics and you adapt it and you create your own versions. So we've created, as you'll see as the story goes on, these are not exactly those characters as they were introduced by Marv. This is our own spin on them. So we're getting to play with all these. And I fell in love with this Justice Alliance group. They're great.
Very cool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can see some of the differences there in the cover and stuff. I love that John Jones is more classic Silver Age.
More classic 50s. Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
And also, let's talk about John and the fact that he quit the team, has assumed this role as this Indian woman at the beginning of the story. Man, that was really some great kind of touching stuff. And I think also very bold because he's a Martian, why wouldn't he shapeshift to be a woman?
Yeah, and that was my thought. I bounced that around with James. I said, so how do you feel about him being a woman? I mean, he's not attached to any of our paradigms down here, and his whole goal is to go out and see the world and see as many different cultures and understand humanity in a whole new way. So, James is like, great, let's do it. So I'm very happy with that. There are certain. I was thinking about this the other day. There are certain characters that I seem to be getting lost here. There we go.
Oh, yeah,
oh, that was you. Okay, I thought that was me.
I just wanted.
I thought my chair was moving around. Certain characters, as when you write these characters, there's certain characters that you may know from the comics, and you never click. It's like, all right, this is the Martian Manhunter. Who cares? It's like he's just another character. But from the first time I ever wrote the character, when you start to write them, you have a different relationship with the characters. And characters that you might have loved as a reader, maybe you didn't click with when you're writing them. And other characters that you didn't think twice about, like John, fell in love with him from the first time I ever wrote him. And to write him again was one of the great pleasures of working on this series. Because he's such an interesting character. And really, he's probably the single most powerful character in the DC universe. I mean, between his strength, his telepathy, invisibility, all these things, it's shape-shifting. He's an incredible character. But what's interesting about him isn't that. What's interesting about him is him and his perspective on the world. So it was really great fun to write him again.
And it seems like your way to write him has changed as well from the way you wrote him in the 80s, and maybe dovetailing in your own pacifist view of, I've always appreciated this with your work on Savior 28 back in the day as well. But it seems like, oh, all right, there's a buddy that's calling me, but that's okay. But I was going to say that, you've taken this view of violence and superhero stories and stuff, and it seems like John was a good vehicle for you to kind of express more feelings.
Yeah, because it really plays off what happened on the show, because he really was kind of done with that. So that's the perspective here. I don't want. He's like it's like every time. What was the line from The Godfather? Every time I get out, they pull me in again, and that's kind of John where he's at. And he does not want to get involved in this at all. But then when it affects him personally, and this dear friend of his is whisked away because people are just vanishing all over the world and being replaced by other people from other parallel universes.
Yeah.
He knows he has to get involved, and he hates it. He hates it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it's funny. It's the stone-faced aliens that sometimes can convey the most emotion. And, I think that's terrific that that John is kind of in this position. And then of course, Wonder Woman, shocked when she winds up on a weird apocalypse. It's out today. I don't want to go too far.
Right, but I have to say, after all these years in this business, it still amazes me the way that people react to a single image on a cover. You've ruined comics forever. Wait, you haven't even read the story. Some people really get it. And it's a cover is supposed. I'm not a big fan of poster covers. I like covers that tantalize you with the idea of a story. And
yes.
What could that? I remember being a kid. I was talking to somebody about this recently. There was a story. Well, I must have been 7 or 8 years old. There was a story called "Robin Dies at Dawn," a Batman story, and the cover was Batman with a dead Robin in his arms, and the dawn is coming up behind him. And as a little kid, I'd never seen a cover. They killed Robin. If there was Twitter now, it'd be, "You bastards, you killed Robin." But a cover tells a story. I always think of the great, the Jack Kirby, the first of the Galactus trilogy. I love that cover. It's just a bunch of people looking while the Watcher's pointing. But your mind, as a kid, before I'd ever read that story, I wrote a whole story in my head about what that image was. And I think this is that kind of cover. It just, first of all, it makes you go, what? And then you can project your own story to go with it. And it's so funny. And it's not a lot of people that reacted in that negative way. So it's a very small percentage, but it still surprises me that people don't get, it's just comics, guys. We're having fun here. Why don't you wait till you read the story and see what it's about? Because I don't think it is what you think it is.
I hear you, man. Jared wants to know, will the final volume or omnibus of the Justice League International run be collected? He needs some Heimlich maneuvers.
Oh, right. Honestly, I'm like the last one to know. Unless they ask me to write an introduction for one of these things, I'm just looking at the solicits like everybody else, going, "Oh, look what they collected." So I don't know until it comes out. I would love to see it. Yeah.
Have there been recent collections of some of your past runs?
Oh, and Justice League,
Just anything.
JLI, yeah, JLI they did. Yeah, there's always stuff coming through, and I can't keep track of them. But JLI they did two omnibuses, if that's the right word. You want to say omnibuy, but I think it's omnibuses.
I believe it.
And then after that, they did a couple of new. They're always doing, more new collections. They're always. It seems like Craven. There's always a new edition of Craven's Last Time that comes out every 20 minutes or so, which makes me very happy. Yeah. So there's a. I'm always sometimes I'm always astonished by the choices of things that get collected and the things that don't. Like I'm still waiting for my Spectacular Spider-Man run with Sal Buscema to be all of it to be collected, and then I see other things which I shall not mention, and I go, why did they collect that? I didn't need to see that story again, And I'm not talking about JLI at all. But so I'm always surprised by what gets collected and when. And like I said, unless they specifically have asked me to be involved with the reprint in some way, I know as much about it as anyone that's watching.
Okay. Nerdette wants you to know that she loves your work on so much stuff, but especially Moonshadow and Going Sane, two subjects we have covered in our
two of my all-time favorite projects. So
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
So
and I will plug again that just a couple of years ago, Dark Horse put out a beautiful hardcover edition of Moonshadow, best edition that anyone has ever. It's like I think we started it at Epic, we went to Vertigo, and now we're at Dark Horse, and it's the most beautiful edition that's been done yet. I'm so proud of it.
That's cool. All right, now I'm scrolling because there was something about. Let's find it here. Oh, that's funny. Now, Dan says, too, I've been rereading the Spider-Man run. Hope it's collected into an omnibus in the U.S. someday. That would
I just, I've been hearing from like people, they collected it in Italy. I forget where. They collected it someplace else, like in Poland or something recently. And I'm thinking, they collected it in Poland and it hasn't been collected here yet? I'm glad for the international readership, but I would love to see it here finally,
Well, and also Sal's house style. I mean, it's such classic Marvel.
Oh, and I think it's some of Sal's best work ever on that book.
Yeah.
I mean, Sal was just unbelievable on that book.
And then, I know, okay, it jumped because we have a couple new comments. But Steven, a couple comments. One is he thinks Heroes Squared would make a great animated series, kind of like Invincible.
I agree.
And there you go. Is it still?
A lot of people don't know about. It's still at Boom. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about Heroes Squared. People are big fans of the work I do with Keith, but they don't know that we ever did a create our own thing, and that's Heroes Squared. And there's an omnibus that Boom put out a couple of years ago with everything, with all the different miniseries and the spin-off miniseries and all these things. So it's I think it's some of the best stuff Keith and I have ever done together. In fact, there's one single issue. Where the two main characters, if the whole issue is just the two of them in therapy, that may be my favorite story that Keith and I have ever done.
I understand, man. And then I think going back, that might have been the first time you and I talked was when Heroes Square was coming out back then, because I was a big fan of Boom right from day one. So
yeah.
Steven also says, I just posted a link to this live stream in my Justice League group, the Justice League International group. So that's very nice. And he says we have Kevin Dooley, Bart Sears, Chris Batista, and Al Gordon over there. We'd love to see you both.
Kevin Dooley. Oh, that's a name I haven't heard in years. Kevin was Andy Helper's assistant on the JLI. That was great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's a good question from David. What are JM's thoughts on his 1980 Star Wars story since he learned his original ending was published in the UK?
For people that don't know this, do you know this story?
Not at
all. Have you ever talked
please.
About this?
Please.
I literally had just one of the first things I did at Marvel was even before I was under contract, so I might have still been working for DC. This goes back to 1980. My son had just been born. They call me up and they say, we need an issue of Star Wars, and I'm like, okay. Now, when you're a freelancer just starting out, you say yes to everything. And I have to say, and I know it's a terrible thing to admit, I was never a huge Star Wars fan. I've seen all the movies and stuff, but I'm not devoted to it. Like I'm a Star Trek guy. I'm not, Star Wars I can enjoy, but it's not like Star Wars. But sure, I'll write a Star Wars story. And right out, I guess the second movie had come out. So I write this story about Lando Calrissian and I guess he's with Chewbacca, and they end up going through this dimensional rift. to this other world where they find this guy named Cody. My son's name was Cody. Cody Sunchild, Sunchilde. Very subtle.
I like
But
it.
this goes back to what you told me about pacifist stories. I don't want to keep you awake though, John.
No.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I have
It's okay. I'm just having fun with you.
I know you are.
So, and the idea is this guy, Cody Sunchild, had been one of the great heroes of the rebellion, but he finally got disgusted with war and violence. He went through he's on this other dimensional planet with a planet full of pacifists. And then the Imperial guys, whatever they're called, the Empire, I guess, follows him through the rift. And so, Lando Calrissian says, "Oh, we got to fight these guys." And the Cody Sunchild's first instinct is to fight again, but then he realizes by fighting he's going to betray everything he believes in. And so he and his pacifist followers decide that they would rather die for a dream of peace than die fighting. And that's exactly what happens.
Wow.
End of story. Until that story went off to the people at Lucasfilm. And they said, "Oh, you can't do that. It makes our guys look bad." And so they rewrote the ending of my story. And there's a line, I have a blog post about it with like the art and how the art was changed and all that stuff.
Okay.
But basically, there was a line in there that said, I might not be quoting it exactly, but the intention was, he died for his dream of peace, but he was wrong. They literally had to underline he was wrong, So here I am. I'm brand new to Marvel. It may be this, one of the first stories they've even paid me for, first, second, third story. And I said, I have to take my name off this story. Which I look back now and I'm thinking that took a lot of balls. Just, you know what I mean? You could be putting your career on the line here, but I just said, I wrote this story for my newborn son. This is not the message I wanted to leave for him. So I have this goofy name that I used to use with my friends, Wally Lumbago. And if you see the book, it says written by Wally Lumbago.
That's your Cordwainer bird.
Yeah, Cordwainer bird, Wally Lumbago. I have another name that I used on a couple of stories also, but Wally Lumbago came out and wrote that story. And then years go by. And I forget how I found out, whether someone wrote to my blog or whether it was on a website. It might have been on Newsarama. I'm not so sure. But they found out that in England, the story came out the way it was originally written, with my name on it, all those years later. So there was a great sense of satisfaction, and I'm telling you, this may be, 25 years later or something that I found out about this or more, that somewhere in the world, the story went out the right way.
I'm still enjoying Wally Lumbago.
Wally Lumbago, yeah. I should write off.
That'd be a great baseball name. Wally Lumbago.
That's true.
Third base.
That's true. Right. That's a great baseball. Actually, it'll be a good baseball announcer also, too.
Yes.
Right? This is Wally Lumbago here in Yankee Stadium.
I'm sure Harry Carey screwed him over on a job back in the 40s.
That's right. That's right.
So there's
Wally Lumbago is a bitter old man somewhere,
That's like and it wasn't. I think all he was trying to do was protect the idea that he could work for DC and Marvel at the time, but learning that damn it, Gene Colan was Adam Austin.
Right. A bunch of guys in the 60s did that because in those days, going back and forth between the companies was a no-no, So sure. I think Frank Giacoia was Frankie Ray, right?
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. I remember that. And there were a couple other guys that had other names that they worked under when they were at Marvel until they got comfortable there and felt like it was safe to say who they really were. But let's think about it really. If you're an editor at DC and you've worked with Gene Colan and you suddenly pick up a Submariner comic by Adam Austin, you take one look at it and it's Gene Colan,
Absolutely, in the case of Gene, no question.
Yeah.
Very distinct. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. Here, and I'm going to put up an evening, everyone, from Comic Crack. Good to see you, Comic Crack. Thank you very much. Getting good questions, everybody. Keep them coming. This is terrific. We got to talk. So, first of all, before we leave Justice League Infinity, 7 issues.
7 issues. And my hope is that it does well enough that we can do another season after this.
Please.
We've gone off to the corners of the multiverse in this one. I'd like to bring it all back down to earth now for another series from here. I already have some ideas.
Well,
Yeah.
again, really ambitious story ideas, and I love that it's still on model with the animated series, and it reminds me of like the Superman adventures and Batman adventure comics of the 90s and early 2000s. And I remember like Mark Miller was writing the Superman comic book. And and this is the right attitude. And obviously you and James already have this from a writing standpoint. But it's like, hey, you're writing the Justice League. I'm going to write the best Justice League stories I can.
Yeah.
Certainly you've done that enough in your career, and James has as well, that I know you guys know the milieu. And that's what's great about Mark's run too on Superman. It's like, no, these are deceptively like really, and especially what you're doing right now, it's a really interesting, complex story.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
is.
shit ton of fun, but it's like, no, you guys are swinging for the fences.
Yeah, it's got great themes. It's got this philosophical aspects going on. It's really fun, and we're taking advantage of the fact that it's not a TV show now; it's a comic book, which means you can use narration. So every issue is narrated by a different character.
I'm so glad you pointed that out.
First issue was Martian Manhunter. Second issue was Superman. I think the third one was Lois Lane. I think.
It is Lois.
And this one is Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really fun too, because I get to, as a writer, you're an actor, so you get to be all these people, and so when you're narrating from their point of view, you're really in their heads, and it's really fun. It's really fun.
And I love what Brian Bendis is doing in the Justice League book. We just talked last night, but it is always great to see, much like when Tom Taylor was first doing Injustice, it's like, hey, guess what? No one's paying attention to this book. This is the best Justice League story right now going. And I would say that truly, this is a fantastic Justice League story that if you're, for whatever reason, you're not reading it, we're only four issues in. It is, and so we're just over halfway there for this arc. It's a terrific story. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of character moments, and a lot of big bombastic action as well. And absolutely worth your time.
Thank you, John. When I was a kid, Justice League, was one of those books that I just loved as a kid. And it's one of those things when I think if I could just go back in time and tell like 9-year-old me that I got to write all these Justice League stories, he would just faint and fall down, And the joke is, here I did Justice League Detroit, then we segued into JLI. But I felt like I never really wrote the Justice League till I wrote for Justice League Unlimited, because that was like our JLI was like, whatever it was to me, it wasn't a Justice League. It was us, doing our thing, and Justice League Detroit. That wasn't the Justice League. That was another thing,
Sure.
So to write for the show was the first time I got to write the classic Justice League. So to come back with this, is really, really fun.
I totally hear you, man. Here first, I'm going to get Adam because he hasn't chimed in yet. He would love to see a Giffen DeMatteis McGuire Legion mini someday. Boy, that'd be fun to see you guys on Legion.
I always say this, and it's the gospel truth. I would work with those guys on anything if the opportunity presented itself. I almost said if the opportunity prevented itself, which that has happened along the way too. But I've said this half jokingly over the years. If Keith called me up and said, "Let's do Millie the Model," I go, "Sure," because it tends to be the collaboration when I work with those guys, even more than whatever the book is. I mean, if someone would have told me that I would end up spending 3 years with Keith writing Scooby Apocalypse, I would have laughed in their face. And it was turned into just such a great gig, because whenever we work together, we have fun and we do something of value,
Totally agree, man. And yeah, whether it was that or when it was all three of you and you guys were doing the Defenders.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
One of my favorite things that I ever did with those guys, which, most people don't even know existed, was we did a very short run with the Metal Men as a backup in the Doom Patrol. And that was one, I could have done that for another 10 years. We had so much fun with those. Those characters were made for us,
Was there enough material there for a trade?
They collected it, not in a trade, but in sort of, I don't know what they call, kind of a fat comic book, really.
Oh yeah, no, they were like those, like kind of a callback to.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, they collected it in something like that. But I would love to see those stories collected again somewhere, because those were really fun.
That's
just when we were I really locked into the characters was when it was over. It was like, I was having so much fun.
Have they come to you at all for any of these 8-page stories that they've been doing in anthologies and stuff? I mean, both for anniversaries of characters, but also, there's like a Valentine's Day special or a Halloween special.
No, not so far. So far.
Okay. Would you be comfortable going back to 8 pages?
Oh, that's how I started out in the
That's
business, you
yeah,
know? Yeah.
sure.
You know, when I started out, it was for the DC anthologies. Everything was, some of them were 5 pages. So, you know, you had to really learn
Yeah.
to learn your craft to get a really good solid story with character development and theme and action in 5 or 6 pages, you know? So yeah,
Totally.
I love working in short stories. I love self-contained stories, which is something that seems to have gotten lost over the years too, you know?
Absolutely. No, I would love to see, honestly. Well, and also, we're in a weird place now for the monthlies as the price goes up and everything. It's $5 for a monthly, and it's like, wow. I mean, I get it, and certainly I want everyone to get paid that deserves, a decent check and everything. I don't know. I mean, and that's why it's been interesting too, seeing them go to these 40-page oversized books that might be, $7 or whatever, but you got a front, we're back in the old days where you got a front story and you got a back
Right,
story.
right, right, right. Yeah, and, or as a kid growing up, I loved the Marvel split books, you know. And when I first started DC, I was writing Aquaman in Adventure Comics. It had 3 different features in it, you know,
Wow.
and they were like, I think they were each 8 or 10 pages, something like that. So I forget, but I mean, that's from a kid's perspective, that's the coolest thing in the world. You get all 3 different heroes in the same book. That's
No,
great.
absolutely. No, and I appreciated the idea behind the Walmart books. What I didn't appreciate was that it was filled with reprint stuff,
Hmm.
and also that it was only available at Walmart. And even Walmart,
Right.
sometimes it was like a hunt to find, like, all right, where are these things? We don't know what you're talking
And
about.
those books never showed up in comic shops at any point in their lives. It was
Uh,
only in
I
Walmart.
I do believe eventually the news stories were collected. In fact, I know they were, and they did wind up in trades in the comic shops because Tom King did Superman that way with Adam Kubert, and Bendis and Nick Darrington did that Batman universe long storyline that eventually found its way in the stores and everything. I
Oh, so
believe
they
that.
had great people doing it. Oh, I see.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Oh
great.
yeah. Oh no, they had time. Yeah. No, and truly, like everybody you could think of, Jimmy and Amanda were doing one book, and Tim Seeley I know was doing Swamp Thing for a while. So absolutely. Oh, this is interesting from Comic Crack. Any desire to dip into the Black Label imprint where you could tell your own stories? As a huge Vertigo fan, I'd love to see you there again.
Yeah, I actually have several creator-owned books in development right now. That, with a little luck and grace, you'll see next year. I can't talk about them, but there are plans afoot. And yeah, because I started. I was one of the first books that came out of Epic at Marvel. I started one of the first books that came out of Vertigo. So so I've been doing creator-owned work along with my mainstream work virtually since the beginning of my career. So I always want to have those things going, and I've got like 3 or 4 different ones that I'm developing with artists right now.
That's
Whether it shows up at Black Label or not, it'll show up someplace.
well, and I noticed one of your, and again going back to Savior 28. Mike Cavallero was retweeting that we were going to talk tonight, and I miss Mike. I hope he's doing good.
Oh,
And you
he's
guys,
doing great.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know you guys have done great collaborations over the years.
yeah, yeah. Impossible Ink was the last thing we did at IDW. Yeah,
And this is nice from Steven. He says his girlfriend was a big fan of your burger book, The Girl in the Bay. We talked about that.
right, 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 right. Yeah, girl, it was great. That was the first time Karen and I had worked together since the early days of Vertigo. And Karen, as we talked about, is one of my oldest, dearest friends in the business. Before we were both in the business, we were friends.
Oh
So,
wow!
oh yeah, yeah. I was her door into the. We never talked about this.
No, actually, no. You guys were,
Karen and I were friends, back in Brooklyn, years and years ago. I broke in at DC, started writing comics, and she graduated from Brooklyn College with a journalism degree. She was looking for a job. Paul Levitz, who was my first editor at DC, was looking for an assistant. I said, I got this friend. She just got out of Brooklyn College with a journalism degree. He said, well, send her up. I sent her up, and the rest is literally history.
Oh, that's terrific. That's
Yeah,
awesome,
yeah.
man. Mari wants to know, speaking of Moonshadow, if any chance of you and John getting back together again. John,
Well, we get together regularly for lunch, so that's one thing. Yeah, I would.
what's John doing these days? I mean,
Oh, he's been doing children's books for like 20 years now.
well, that makes sense.
Award-winning children's books. There's a show. He does these wonderful sort of Zen tales for kids, a series of books, and they turned it into an animated series on Apple Plus TV.
Wow.
the name of which escapes me, but I'm going to look it up so we don't forget what it's called. And it just won. It was nominated for an Emmy. I think it won a Peabody Award. I mean, it's the show has been very successful. His books are hugely successful, and he was like brilliantly talented when I met him when he was, I don't know, 22 or something. He was doing work that your eyes would leap out of your head, and he's just kept getting better and better over the years. He's so gifted in so many ways and such a good guy.
I've told you before, man, that was the excitement of Moonshadow. It's like, this is comics? Wow.
Yeah. That's how it was for me writing it. It was the same exact feeling. It was like, I don't have to do that stuff anymore. I can do whatever I want and tell this story in ways that I never even thought I could tell a story,
That is, and truly, people like John are a great example of when I take a newbie into a comic book store, and no disrespect for this example, but they're looking for high and lowest, and they think that's all that
right.
look like from the Sunday Funnies. And it's like, no, check this out. And Dave I'm blanking, Arkham Asylum with
Dave McKean.
Dave McKean, thank you, my man. It's like John and Dave McKean and people like that, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, and then I worked with Kent Williams on Blood at Tail right after that.
Yes.
Kent is amazing, and
Yes.
I just looked it up. The name of the series on Apple Plus is called Stillwater.
Wow.
And if you have kids, it's a beautiful show.
I might be bugging you for John's contact info.
Okay.
Because I'd love to talk to John. I've never had him on Word Below.
Yeah, he's just a great guy. We hadn't seen each other for a number of years, and then about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, a mutual friend was in town because he lives not far from me, and we got together for lunch. It was like, oh, it's you, and we've been getting together regularly ever since.
That's great. Are you doing New York this weekend?
Oh, no.
I understand.
I don't feel comfortable. I really, really don't.
Mark, we want you safe and healthy. I say that. Truly.
I have dreams about. I had a dream just the other night that I was in this big hall, and I was like, I got to get out of here. There's a convention coming in here, and I got to get out of here.
No disrespect to the event. I still know that it was a hospital for COVID not that long ago.
That's right.
I'm sorry. There's cooties in that building before.
Let's face it. We all know that we all go to conventions and get sick anyway.
Yes.
Now, maybe with all that they have in place, that I hope everyone goes and has a great time and is healthy.
Absolutely.
I am just not psychologically prepared to step into a hall with thousands of people. I'm just not.
I do know, and I don't blame you. DeMatteis says he got his COVID shots at the Javits Center, so there you go.
Right, so there you go.
I am going to go to Baltimore. I got to judge and help nominate the Ringos.
Oh, that's great.
So that was really nice. Yeah, and so I went, and you're right, because I went to Terrificon in Connecticut in August and had a great time. But on Sunday, I really felt run down. I'm like, oh, damn it, I got it. I know I got it. And thank God I went home, got tested. No, everything's fine.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, man, it's like, no. So, and I'm sure I'll go through the same kind of paranoia in a couple of weeks for Baltimore.
Yeah. Everybody has to make their own choices about this stuff. It's just, we all know what makes us comfortable and what makes us uncomfortable. And walking into a hall with thousands of people, as much as I actually do miss going to conventions, and I really do, for a lot of reasons. But maybe next year, not this year.
I hear you, man. No, absolutely. I don't blame you at all. This is a nice comment from Wesley. I recently picked up Craven's Last Hunt in hardcover. I didn't have any J.M. DeMatteis stuff prior to Mercy. I don't know what Mercy is.
Oh, Mercy is actually the book that I did with the Vertigo launch back in the 90s.
Oh.
And then we brought out a new edition through Dover Books just a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And that, like, Greenberg the Vampire, is that back in your control and everything?
No, actually, Greenberg the Vampire was done just before all that creators-owned stuff came in, because the original story was done in a Marvel black and white book called Bizarre Adventures.
Oh, wow.
So technically, that's a Marvel character.
Okay.
So I'm figuring, Marvel's going to run out of characters, and then we get to see the Greenberg the Vampire series on Netflix, or Disney Plus or whatever.
Here's open. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Oh my God.
Oh my, yeah, 100%.
I don't know if there's a huge audience for a reclusive Jewish vampire, but they could be out there.
That's awesome, man. I wanted to ask, because the announcement was made, you're coming back to Ben Reilly.
Yes.
And there's the cover, Ben Reilly Spider-Man coming up. So yeah, tell me about coming back to Ben Reilly and where he is now compared to the Clone Saga days.
Well, this. First of all, I love that character. Whatever ups and downs the Clone Saga had, the Ben Reilly character was a great character, and I did 2 miniseries with Ben. One was The Lost Years, and the other was Spider-Man Redemption. 2 of my favorite things I've ever done with Spider-Man, especially The Lost Years. And so he's Peter, but he's not Peter. He's a little darker because of what he's gone through. He's a little more complex because he's been basically in exile for 5 years. It's twisted him a little bit more that way. So he's a really interesting character. So, when my editor, Danny, called me up and said, well, Ben Reilly, as soon as I heard Ben Reilly, I was like, yes. You know what I mean? I didn't have to think about it, because returning to Spider-Man, to the Peter Parker Spider-Man, I might have to stop and think about it, because I've done so many stories.
Absolutely.
So I'd have to think, do I have something of value to say with this character? Whereas with Ben, there's so much left that's untapped. And then where they're setting the story is right in the point in the Clone Saga where Peter and Mary Jane go off to have their baby. Ben is just for the first time stepping back into his life as Spider-Man, but he's alone. He's alone in New York. He can't go back to the Peter Parker life, because if there's a Peter Parker, everyone knows he moved. So he's this fictional creation, Ben Reilly, who doesn't really have a life except for putting on a costume and being Spider-Man. So a lot of the journey in this series has to do with his struggles with his own identity. And of course, lots of villains and running around and punching and hitting too, of course. Psychological depth combined with punching and hitting, which is the formula for great comics.
Man, and I remember Ben's role in this, but when you killed off in the Clone Saga, when you killed off Aunt May, that story always sticks out to me in particular. And also, poor Ben had to kind of be on the outside.
He was sitting on the roof because he couldn't be there. Yeah, so he's weeping on the roof while Peter gets to be by her bedside. Yeah. He's a little traumatized, Ben. He's had a rough time.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I'm delighted. And David Baldion, if I'm pronouncing your last name right, I hope I am, is doing the art, and he is doing a great job. Really, really powerful stuff.
I'm surprised that and I guess from a visual standpoint, it makes sense. But I always loved the Scarlet Spider hoodie.
Right, except that he's not the Scarlet Spider here. He's
right.
Spider-Man, and this is the outfit that he wore when he was Spider-Man. So that's why we're going with that.
Okay. Have you talked? I know Cantwell has been using Ben in Iron Man, part of a group that he put together in a very weird,
I know, it's so funny because I know Chris a little bit, and so I saw this. He put out this one panel, and in the panel was Ben Reilly, the Fabulous Frogman, another character of mine.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's awesome.
And the Gargoyle, another character of mine,
Wow.
And he was like, I guess you've been living in my unconscious all these years, I was just happy to see them all back,
That's great, man. No, and I didn't realize all 3 of them were your guys. That's fantastic.
Right. Well, Ben was it's
group thing.
It's an interesting thing. This is really an interesting thing to talk about, because there's been so much talk about, creators getting their due for the characters that they created and being fairly compensated and all that. But then there are the characters that it's really hard to pin down, like a Ben Reilly. So Jerry Conway does a story where for like a few pages in a story, there's a Spider-Man clone. He doesn't have a name. He's just a Spider-Man clone, and he's gone. Years later, we bring back this clone, and then at a group meeting of the Spider-Man writers, we start to create who this character is going to be. It's Ben Reilly. So who created Ben Reilly? Well, someone would say it's just a Spider-Man clone, so Stan Lee and Steve Ditko created him. No, Jerry Conway created him. No, all you guys created him. So, how do you answer that question? Even with, with some of the stuff that's been used, like they used Baron Zemo 2 in The Winter Soldier, which I haven't seen yet. So I can't make any comment on the show. Yeah, I haven't seen any of the Disney Plus stuff yet.
Wow.
I'm waiting for the Beatles thing. Oh no, wait, is the Beatles thing on Disney Plus? Yeah. When the Beatles thing comes,
it's on Apple actually.
Is it? No, it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay.
So when that comes on, because I'm a Beatle fanatic. So when that comes on in November, I'll get my Disney Plus and gorge myself on all those Marvel shows. But my point being, okay, who created Baron Zemo? So in the 60s, Stan and Jack created the original Baron Zemo,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Years go by, it's now the 70s, and Roy Thomas and Tony Isabella do a story where there's this villain, the Phoenix, who's revealed on the last page or something to be Zemo's son, who falls into a vat of something, and you never hear from him again. More years go by, and Zek and I are doing Captain America, and I think, I remember that old story. This could be a really cool villain. So Zek and I take this character, and over the course of 2 years, we build him up to be the Baron Zemo that is now this major villain in the Marvel Universe, right? But we didn't create the character. You know, it's like, sometimes it's, when you're working in a shared universe, sometimes it's a hard call. You know, other times it's very clear. So-and-so created this character, so-and-so created that character, blah, blah, blah. Other times it's really, you know, it's like you're slicing up a pie. And that's why sometimes you see, you know, thanks to 250 people,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
because we're all sort of, I've always had this, I've had this image of this great whale moving through the ocean, right? And say it's the Marvel universe or it's the DC universe, you know? And we're all like Captain Ahab, and we jump on this whale with our spear, and we carve a story in his skin, you know. And then the whale throws us off, and the next guy's on the whale, and he's carved. So we've all carved these stories into the side of this massive whale, which only gets bigger to contain all these stories, you know. So we're all part of this shared thing, and I understand why sometimes it's difficult to figure out who created who and who did what, you know. So anyway, that's.
No, I loved all of that, man. That was fantastic. And what a grisly way to put it, that they're all carving this on the height of a giant whale. That's fantastic.
Well, the whale can take it. This is the story whale. He's very strong. We're not hurting him. Don't worry. We're making him rich. In fact, we're making him very rich.
Mario, yeah, really. Mario wants you to know that initially he hated the Clone Saga, but you and Howard Mackey made him love Ben Reilly, so that's cool.
Yeah, I think even for people that had problems with the Clone Saga, there were some really excellent character. Kane, the character of Kane, great villain, you know, who's not really a villain, an anti-hero, more like it, who I also loved writing, and even, you know, typical thing there. So I think it was Howard Mackey and Terry Cavanaugh came up with the idea of Kane, but then I did the Lost Years miniseries, and I peeled his head back and kind of filled out his character. But they created the character. I added to the character, you know. So again, it's never, not never, but a lot of times it's not that cut and dry, this idea of creation.
I understand. Now, you know, I'm going to make you talk a little Star Trek because I missed my opportunity last year when this book came out. But Hell's Mirror, and there's the full credits right there. Matthew, who's a fantastic artist.
Oh, Matt is great. He's a buddy and a wonderful artist and someone who I really love to work with. Yeah.
That's cool. And yeah, no, he has my attention whenever he's got something new. I've yet to have my word balloon. I am embarrassed to say that.
Oh, really? Oh, you should. He's a very intelligent and eloquent guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had brief conversations at conventions and stuff.
Yeah, we're working on a creator-owned thing together also right now. We're developing.
Oh, that's great.
Together.
Oh,
yeah.
wonderful to hear. Well, there you go. So there's a new excuse to talk to Matthew soon. But yeah, this great story, man. This is kind of the Mirror Universe version of Space Seed and what happens to Khan.
Yeah, it was the same thing I said when, you know, the editor called me up and said, Ben Reilly, yes. You know, they call you up and they go, Mirror Universe, Khan, yes. You know, it's like, that's it. There's no hesitation, you know, because I am a complete Star Trek nut especially the original series. You know, Wrath of Khan, one of my favorite movies of all time, not just my favorite Star Trek movie, just one of my favorite movies of all time. So how could you say no to that? It was, and the great thing about those characters is we know them so well. You don't have to struggle with the dialogue. You know what I mean? It's like Khan starts to talk and you've got Khan. Kirk opens his mouth, you've got Kirk. You know, Spock opens his mouth, you've got, there's no problem there. It's like you start channeling them instantly. So I loved working on that story.
I so hear you, and I don't want this to become me crapping on something, but I will point out again that the eloquence of Wrath of Khan and the fact that we were just fed the reruns over and over again, Shatner and Nimoy earned that moment, the death scene moment, and everything that happens in Khan. And then you get Star Trek Into Darkness, and it's not even a good cover band version of that dynamic because, I mean, these characters just met each other. Whereas in Wrath,
of course, you had whatever was at that point 20 years of history.
Yes,
literally, and for the characters and for us in our identification with the characters. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's
and again,
true.
and that's why I mean, and again, No, that as soon as the movie's out, all right, how do we bring Spock back? But that's the
Right.
thing, that they really earned those moments of, oh my God, my best friend is dying,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
do anything. And
In
it's like,
some ways, they really, I understand why they brought him back, but in some ways, it would have been really interesting if they didn't, and if they moved forward with those other new characters, and it would have been a really different, fresh start for Star Trek.
well, in one of those, I think it was called Wayport, the anthology series that IDW was doing for a while, in the last couple of years. Gabe Hardman wrote a 10-page Star Trek Phase 2 story with the Vulcan replacement Zahn. And it's like, oh, that's great. And I wondered, again, being the massive fan of Trek that you are, would you ever want to do, and obviously you've done this alternate mirror universe Khan story, but are there like unrealized Star Trek ideas that you would want to pursue in any?
It's not like I'm walking around with a bunch of Star Trek ideas, but if someone said Star Trek to me, would you want to? The answer would be, if as long as it was the original series and those characters, instantly. And yeah, the idea. Well, there's another what if. What if they did that series? What if they had done it and Spock maybe showed up in a couple of episodes in season 2 or something, but they had all these other new characters. That would have changed quite a bit as well.
Well, Mark, I think you and I have talked about this. That's why I think, as much as new, Discovery and now Strange New Worlds, and they're mining some of the old characters and ideas, I've always said I think it would have been much more interesting if Michael Burnham were raised by Vulcans, but a different Vulcan, and then you could have Sarek and this other Vulcan raising a human, compare notes of, wow, well, you've got a half-human kid, I'm raising a human child, because it almost makes it like Sarek. I always use this terrible analogy. It's like saying Martin Luther King was the only civil rights leader in the 60s. And it's like, no, there are other really important people that had shades of difference. I mean, my God, they've made plays about, fictitious meetings between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Or whatever, and again, simple comparison. But yeah, I mean, it's like, that's why Gary Graham's character on Enterprise was such an interesting character. And let's have a Vulcan that doesn't trust the humans, and maybe has is like, wait a minute, let's see what these guys can do before we hand them the keys to the galaxy and everything.
Yeah.
And that's great. That makes for different stories.
It's funny because I adore a classic Star Trek, and I haven't watched a lot of it in a long time. It just so happens that this week when I was on the treadmill, that's why I watch a lot of stuff, and I watched a couple, and these were third season episodes, like the Empath and Elan of Troyes. I watched those too. And that's like the worst season of Star Trek. And these episodes were really good, and the performances hold up. And people love to say, oh, it was this cheesy, cheap show. It wasn't a cheap show. If you read about it, what they were spending on that show back in the day, those were state-of-the-art special effects. You have to remember they were doing it in 1966 and 1967 on a television budget. But it was not a cheesy show on that level. It wasn't cheesy special effect. It looks that way now in high def, which it was never meant to be seen in.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. But I know this is not a Star Trek podcast, so we can.
Wrong.
Oh, okay. And William Shatner's going into space.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that fantastic?
He's
my
amazing.
God.
90 years old, man. He's amazing. He's just amazing.
Man, I saw him, they're re-releasing the first 4 movies on 4K now.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a ton of interviews. Mark, he looks and sounds, no disrespect to you or me, younger than us. He looked like he was 50. He's 90 years old.
I know.
And it's so sharp.
Incredible.
But that proves, I remember Orson Welles saying this to Peter Bogdanovich in one of their many interviews, that it's like, you need a reason to get up and get out of bed and do something in the morning. That's what
that's what creativity does for you. I mean, when I'm writing a story, when I'm immersed in that story, it could be me 30 years ago. It could be me 30 years from now. It doesn't matter because time doesn't exist anymore. Who I am in space and time doesn't exist. All that exists in the story is the story, And I always say the great thing and the worst thing about what I do for a living is every story I write is the first story, because you always have to create something from the ground up. And yes, I have certain skills that I've developed over the years, but really I still have to look at a blank space, look at a universe of nothing, and send forth creation, and that's the horror of it and the delight of it, but that's also what keeps you young.
I hear you, man. How's the writing course going?
I took it online for the first time. I did a couple of online, and they went really, really, really well. And then
Good.
I got so busy this year. Work is so busy this year that I haven't
Good.
had a chance to return to it. But I will at some point. But right now I'm like super busy with a lot of different projects. So
Okay. Last word on Trek. Dante wanted to know what you thought about the new shows. Are you watching the new shows at all?
I have seen them. Just because something isn't for me doesn't mean that it's bad. So I want to make that clear. So because I don't like knocking anybody's work, because I know how much hard work goes into anything. I mean, look at the hard work that goes into a 22-page comic book, let alone the work that has to go to creating, 10 episodes of television, So they just don't resonate with me. I will say certain characters have resonated with me. I love Jason Isaacs' character in the first season of Discovery.
Me too.
I thought he was great. It's a terrible thing to say, spoilers. I was rooting for him at the end of the season, because he created such a great character. And I love, I can't think, Anson Mount as Pike.
Oh God, I agree with you.
Was fantastic.
Yes.
In many ways, those are the first two captains that came close for me to Kirk, because Kirk is always my number one.
Yes.
And so I'm actually looking forward to the Pike show, because it seems like they're going back to the Planet of the Week stories, and Anson Mount is great. So I'm keeping my hopes up.
I feel the same way. I'm also intrigued and like the idea that Dr. Mabenga, Nurse Chapel, and Uhura
yeah,
were serving on the Enterprise before Kirk got there. I think that's great. And I know that
really
in one of my favorite novels, they say that it was called like Enterprise: The First Mission, and Kirk is the new guy on the ship, and Spock and Uhura, at least in that version, were kind of part of the old guard and everything. And I agree with you about Anson Mount, and also just Pike in general. Mark, did you write that Marvel Star Trek Pike series that only made it like 17 issues? I forget who wrote it.
No.
Okay.
I don't know who wrote that. I don't know.
I
only wrote one other Star Trek story. It was the last, when I first started at Marvel, it was the final issue of Marvel's Star Trek series.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But didn't you write? You wrote DC Star Trek, didn't you?
Did not. No, I've only written two Star Trek comics in my entire career.
Wow, that's insane. I don't know why. And it's funny because I've had Michael Jan Friedman on, and we've talked about his stuff from DC and also his novels and everything. Very interesting. So I hear Ben Hayes has a great comment here. Mr. DeMatteis, you are an amazing writer. Love all your work from Vertigo to Justice League. What was it like being the writer that ended the original volume of Justice League of America and then became one of the writers of what I guess, first Justice League and then
Justice League International, then Justice League America, and Justice League Europe, and Justice League everything else for 5 years. Yeah. What happened was basically Jerry Conway was writing Justice League. It was the Detroit League, and he left the book, and Andy Helfer asked me to step in and finish off a story Jerry was in the middle of. So I did that, and then I guess they knew at that point that Justice League would be ending, and then I guess the Legends miniseries was going to come out of that, and then there would be a new Justice League out of that. So he asked me to do like the final 4-parter, killing Vibe and killing Steel and all this stuff,
Yeah.
And I always say that Jerry Conway had the last laugh because those characters are all over TV now. So
Yeah.
So I wrote those four, the couple of Jerry issues before that, and then the 4 issues at the end. But as what I said earlier, I didn't feel like I was writing Justice League. I was writing this other version of the Justice League. It almost felt like it was a Justice League spin-off book. And then I thought when that was done, I was done. Until, Andy, knocked on my door one day and said, well, we want you to work on this with Keith. So it wasn't like any kind of plan like, oh, I'm going to wrap up this Justice League and then jump into this new league. It had nothing to do with that. It was just, I got lucky.
Did they say no to any members of that original Justice League team?
I had no say in who the characters were, and I don't even think Keith did. I think the upper echelons at DC basically dictated who was going to be in that book. And it was the best thing they could have done for us because most of them were B-level characters. And when you have B-level characters that, when you have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and The Flash, there's just so far you can bend this thing because they're all in their own books, and you're going to have the writers and the editors, down your throat. It was through the grace of Denny O'Neil that we got Batman. That much I know. Wow. So by getting Beetle and Booster, and then once we caught on, and we brought in Fire and Ice and these really interesting offbeat characters that we could make our own. That was the best thing that ever happened to us. If we had gotten all the big characters, maybe we would have botched it and we wouldn't be talking about that book today.
I absolutely understand, man. Chris Conley says, I recently reread the Defenders run on both sides of issue 100, and I just want to say thanks for those stories. I got a lot out of them then and now. That was
one of the first books when I went over to Marvel at the beginning of my career, and that was like my passion book. I mean, not that you're putting your passion into all the books, but Defenders had a tradition for weirdness.
Sure.
Yes. Thanks to the brilliant work of like Steve Gerber, and then I think Dave Kraft worked on it. Ned Hannigan. Wow. Everybody that came on that book kind of had the leeway to make it their own. So it was in a weird way. It was almost like sneaking a creator-owned book into the Marvel universe with Marvel characters, So that was the book where I got to, I didn't even, looking back now, I realized I'm rehearsing for like Moonshadow and all my other stuff by pushing and going, can I get away with doing this? Can I do this kind of story? Well, this is a little odd, And so I loved working on that book. And I worked with Don Perlin on that book. It was for something like 3 years. Such a nice man and an excellent storyteller. And we had a really nice collaboration. And so I have great affection for that book. Now, when I look back, I see a young writer still learning his craft. So I can look at a certain sentence and go, ooh,
Sure.
But when I look at it as a whole, and that I see that people are still reading it now and have positive responses to it, it makes me really, really happy because I poured heart and soul into that book.
That's great, man. That's excellent. And here, a couple more people. Dante says that was the run that I had been hunting for back issue bins in the late 80s as a 12-year-old. Such a great series. Very cool.
And the nice thing about these Marvel black and white, well, that was done. They did the black and white phone book ones, and they've done the Defenders there, and they did they did Epic Editions, which collected that whole run. So it's always nice to see these stories come back. It's always nice because when we were doing them, especially back then, they weren't really doing collections of anything. Even when Craven was collected, it was a big deal when they collected Craven in a hardcover. It would, those things were just starting. I always tell the story of pitching. I think it was Denny O'Neil on a Batman story, which is sort of an early version of Craven's Last Hunt, and but with Batman. And Denny said, "Well, we've already got our Batman graphic novel for the year. Come back next year." What I mean?
Yeah.
But it was now you sneeze and it gets collected. So, but then it was a big deal when something got collected.
Well, again, Mark, it was that energy of the 80s and the evolution of the direct market, and that all of a sudden, all these direct market stores were popping up.
Yeah.
And man, from high school through college and stuff, it was like, oh my God, there's like a specialty store for comic books as opposed to the spinner rack at 7-Eleven or the drugstore.
Right. And you could walk in and buy this whole collection with the whole series and not have to buy all these little individual issues. Yeah.
And also just posters and just everything. It was so, again, it really was, as a young fan, so thrilling that this suddenly kind of evolved.
And as a creator, it was the same way. The 80s were really kind of astonishing. Not just the explosion of creator-owned work, and I feel so lucky that I got to do so much, but just the freedom that we had on mainstream books to do all kinds of weird shit, I mean, I did Dr. Fate for 2 years, Dr. Fate series with Sean McManus for 2 years at DC.
Yes.
Which I see, aside from the fact that it's a pre-existing character, which I completely changed, it could have been a Vertigo book. It could have been a creator-owned book because they allowed me to do everything I want. Every obsession that I had in my life was in that series,
Wasn't that was the when the couple become the Woodward Naboo, and Kent died.
And Kent died, and Naboo was living in Kent's dead body, and and it was like a combination of like JLI comedy with metaphysics and spirituality and melodrama and psychodrama, everything that I like in a story was in that book for those 2 years. And first Karen Berger, then Art Young were my editors on that book, and they let me do it exactly the way I wanted to do. We had so much. Same thing with Craven. I mean, no one got in the way on that story. No one. Do it, just go ahead. I always say, I remember one note. There was a note that there were one shot of Vermin where they said there were too many bones around him because he was a cannibal. Could you reduce the number of bones? That was it. That was the only note that I remember. We had a lot of freedom.
Good stuff. I know, man, and you're right. And also, there wasn't the burden of responsibility that the IPs now have.
Yes,
because of TV and film, where it's like, all right, wait a second, we can't do this because dot. Right. And yeah, man, no, again, Bendis and I were talking about this last night, because in a lot of ways, this is a new kind of frontier, even from 20 years earlier, when Brian and Mark Miller and Greg Rucka and Ed Brubaker and Gail Simone, they were the new kids on the block, and they were there with the fresh ideas. Now at both companies, I do think you've got some interesting new people that are in charge. Plus, much like the 80s boom, where you guys were all able to do so much interesting creator-owned stuff or independent stuff from the mainstream of DC.
Right.
And we're in this weird kind of new place. Brian even described it as three different things of DC and Marvel. I guess what would count now as creator-owned books. And then just this, the YA audience too, and that's something that again you've had your moments.
That was a big crusade of mine for years, at a time when really nobody wanted to hear it.
Yes, what was your and forgive me, the series you did with Mike Plug that we
Abadazad, which no one can pronounce. Abadazad, yeah,
I got it. I was having trouble with DeMatteis, but Abadazad I remember.
First we did it for CrossGen, and then Disney bought it. We did it as a book series for Disney, and I don't want to get that's a long story, which we probably have covered in the past. But one of my favorite projects that I have ever worked on. And then Plug and I did another series called The Stardust Kid. That's Boom, yeah. Boom, Archaea through Boom has a beautiful collected edition out. Yeah.
And that was I'm so glad that Boom and Archaea kind of found each other.
Yeah.
Because Archaea really has become like their Vertigo, and also just their ambitious. And also, my God, I got to say, Boom, just regular Boom, has been very ambitious with their projects as well.
Keith and I were working with Ross Ritchie when Ross was doing this out of his living room, and we started doing Hero Squared. It was sort of like the old Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney movies. Let's do a comic book company, and we'll pull up the curtain, and here we go, And I have a lot of respect for Ross for what he has done and how he has built that company up over the years.
I so agree. Oh, look who's joining us, everybody! It's Dean Haspiel.
Hey, Dean.
DeMatteis is hands down one of the very best writers of any generation of medium. An honor and pleasure to have collaborated with him. What did you and Dean work on back in the day?
We worked on. He was doing the Fox series with Mark Waid. Yeah, with Mark Waid, and
yes,
we did I wrote the last issue of that series. I don't remember why Mark couldn't do the last issue. And Mike Cavallera and I were doing a backup with the Shield that ran behind the Fox story. So we did this last issue. I think where both stories sort of collided,
Oh, that's cool. Yes, and I remember you and Mike doing the backup Shield.
Yeah. Oh, Dean is great. Yeah. Dean is so talented. I would love to work with him on he's another one. I'd work with him on anything.
Craig wants to know if you prefer Marvel method or full script when collaborating with an artist.
I like them both. I do both. Like I said, I'm working on these creator-owned projects now, and a couple of them are full script. A couple of them are going to be plot first. It really depends on the story, and it depends on my mood, and depends on the artist that I'm working with and what they want. So both have their strengths and both have their weaknesses. The joy, also when people hear about Marvel style, their mind goes to these stories they heard about Stan Lee, where it's like, hey, Jack, let's bring back Dr. Doom. There's the plotting session. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not what it's like. If you see my plots are very, very detailed, page by page, panel by panel. Here's a little sidebar about what's going on psychologically in them. I mean, they're like first draft full scripts in a lot of ways. But what it gives you the joy of doing is then getting the artwork back and reacting to that. So the sequence that you may have thought would require a lot of words, you look at the pages and you go, I can put one word on that page or no words on that page. Another sequence where you thought would all be visual and work fine, you get the art back and you realize you have to add to it. And this thing that I thought I could put in the story here, it's not going to fit. I'm going to move it over here. So it's a different way to work. And the example that I always use, the best example, is when I worked with Sal Buscema, Spectacular Spider-Man 200 with the death of Harry Osborn. Harry dies at the end of the story, and I, map it all out for Sal in the plot, what the panels are going to play out and what the emotions are going to be. And in my head, I'm going to schmaltz this thing up. I am going to pour on, the purple prose and the melodrama and the poetry, because I want to break everybody's heart, And then I get the pages back from Sal, and if you look at that book, you look at the last 3 pages, there are no words on them. Because when I got the artwork back, he said everything that I put into the plot was there in the pictures. And if I would have put a word on those pages, I would have ruined it.
I understand.
So that's the joy of working plot first. Full script, you're in complete control of your materials. It's like the whole thing is there. But even there, you give that same full script to 3 different artists, you'll get 3 different stories back. Because, what's emphasized, no matter how much you describe that panel, each artist is going to emphasize something differently in that panel. You cannot separate the writing and the art. No matter how much people want to do it, you can't. One cannot exist without the other. They just can't.
That's the magic of comics, man.
That is absolutely.
And that's the difference between those of us who read and get it and create and get it, to the newbies that are like, I don't know how you read this. I don't know, like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do?
I know. My wife has that issue to this day.
Really?
She's never sure where to look.
Wow.
Like, where does it go from this? Some people, it just doesn't click with their brains. And I always talk about those of us that are into comics, there's some specific chemical in the brain that the first time we see that combination of words and pictures, that chemical drops and we're addicted, and that's it.
You're right. Have you ever had to translate manga?
No.
Okay, because I was a couple weeks ago, I was talking to Max Allen Collins about Batman City of Dreams, which started off as a manga, and then he wrote it. Basically, said I wrote a different story to the art. And I don't know how you are with manga. I can't get my brain to go right to left.
Right. Oh, I had so many learning disabilities growing up that I think I would make my brain explode if I had to do that. I don't think I could handle it.
I'm with you. Am I missing anything, Mark? Is there anything else coming up that we haven't talked about?
Well, there's a lot of stuff coming up that I can't talk about. I'm working with a company in another country on a big animation project.
Hey, awesome. Wonderful.
I'm working on a novella. I'm writing a novella for who I can't say who it's for because it hasn't been announced yet. So, between the Marvel and DC stuff and the creator-owned stuff and the novella and the animation stuff, I am super busy. And nothing makes me happier than just to be creative and be busy,
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And again, we will look forward to Ben Reilly when does Ben Reilly drop?
Comes out in January.
Okay.
And Justice League is just came out. Right there it is. Just came out today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Find out why they're kissing. And I swear it's not the end of comics as we know it. I swear.
Absolutely not. No, unbelievable stories here and great ideas from you and James as far as the writing goes. Again, who's your artist on Justice League?
Ethan Beavers is the artist, and Nick Filardi does beautiful work with the colors. Yeah.
Colors, absolutely. No, it's on point. If you miss Justice League Unlimited, you're getting that vibe in Justice League Infinity, and then some. Because again, with the idea that it's not confined to 22 minutes of story, you guys are going to give us 7 issues of a very epic, very intense character study of a lot of your favorite characters and great ideas from an adventure standpoint and a character standpoint. So congratulations, man. I'm so glad I saw that cover of issue 4 of Darkseid and Wonder Woman kissing, and I'm like, I want to know what the hell's going on. So
it worked. It worked.
It absolutely worked. So there was another excuse to have a new conversation with
That's
Mark.
Right. That's right.
So, thanks.
It's great to talk to you as always, John.
Always the best, man. And I absolutely appreciate it. I was telling you, well, first of all, I teased tomorrow night I'm going to talk to Scott Snyder. We're going to talk about everything he's doing. A lot of his creator-owned stuff is about to hit the atmosphere, so we'll talk about that. Thursday night, Kinescope, and Mark and I were talking about Kinescope because Mark's an old TV and radio nerd, and he can appreciate some of the classic stuff. And we're talking about a great series from CBS that came during the Blacklist years. It was called You Are There, and it was historic reenactments with CBS News reporters on the scene
Right. It would be like Walter Cronkite at the Revolutionary War kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yes, literally, Cronkite was always the narrator, and one of the episodes we're doing is the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
There you go.
The other one we're doing is the death of Socrates. And it was really interesting. It was written by a lot of writers that fell victim to the communist blacklist of the 50s.
Oh, that I didn't know. Oh, that's
and there's
really
also a lot of them would put current events and debates, much like great science fiction, in these historical reenactments to kind of work their way around the censors.
So were they writing under pseudonyms?
Yes, in some cases they were, yes. And we're also going to discuss a great movie that came out in the 70s that Martin Brest directed. Woody Allen
Great
was
movie,
the star,
yeah.
The Front.
Yeah.
And it's all about how a lot of these writers would hire people to put their names on scripts and pretend to be the writer so they could continue to work and make money on the side. And it's I mean, the movie Trumbo also kind of explored that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and horrible part of our history.
100%, man. So that's going to be on Kinescope on Thursday night. And we're going to do an Oh Yeah Trek watch with me and Mitch Halleck of Terrificon. And we're going to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, the animated series. And we'll see. I mean, I got to be honest, Mark. I've liked 3 or 4 of the 8 episodes we've gotten so far of Lower Decks.
Okay, I have not seen it. I have not seen it.
So yeah, no, it's pretty good, pretty good.
Oh, that's good to know, because I know, you know, you don't go for all this stuff. You're very discerning when it comes to Star Trek.
No, I hear you, man. I hear any final questions here. I'm looking, and I don't mean to keep you.
That's
but,
okay.
Deidre wants to know if you had the chance to write the original JLI team again, Oberon and Max included, would you?
You know, there are times over the years where I've said, all right, we're done. You know, we've gotten back together. We've done another thing. We did this, and I never want to do it again. But, you know, enough time has passed that if they had the 3 of us and got the 3 of us together to do it, sure, why not? We'd have some fun. Do a nice mini-series or something. You know, we always wanted to do, and we pitched this back in the 90s, I think, like the final JLI story, like when they're older, you know what I mean? Like,
sure. Yeah.
You know, and I think that would be a great story to tell, you know, Beetle and Booster, you know, 2 old guys busting out of their costumes, you know, signing comics at a convention, you know. But you know, if it was with Keith and Kevin, I would absolutely do it.
Excellent. That's great to hear, man. And Stephen wanted to know what it was like writing Ted Kord's last story with Batista and Booster Gold.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example. We're like, oh, we don't have to be Beetle and Booster again. And then, oh, we're writing the Booster Gold book. We have to bring Beetle in. Or when we did Justice League 3000 and 3001, what did we end up doing? Beetle, Booster, Fire, and Ice. It's like they're in our blood. We can't get rid of them, you know? So, yes. So, of course, I'd do them again.
Absolutely. Great characters, man. Mark, thanks for your time, as always.
My pleasure.
And thanks, everybody, for watching. Until next time.